The origin of Turkic-speaking peoples. According to historians and linguists, the Proto-Turkic language originated in Central East Asia, potentially in the Altai-Sayan region, or Mongolia. Initially, Proto-Turkic speakers were potentially both hunter-gatherers and farmers. They later became nomadic pastoralists. According to Peter Benjamin Golden, the ancient Turkic Urhimat appears to have been located in southern Siberia from the Lake Baikal region to eastern Mongolia. The Proto-Turks in their southern Siberian Mongolian homeland were in contact with speakers of Eastern Iranian, Uralic and Paleo-Siberian languages. Juha Janhunen notes that, there is, indeed, reason to assume that Mongolia is primarily the source region of the Turkic language family, while the Mongolic homeland was located further to the east, in western Manchuria. A possible genealogical link of the Turkic languages to Mongolic and Tungusic languages, specifically a hypothetical homeland in Manchuria, such as proposed in the Altaic or Trans-Eurasian hypothesis, by Martin Robbets, has received support but also criticism, with opponents attributing similarities to long-term contact. On this controversy, Uchiyama et al. 2020 notes that, the ultimate Proto-Turkic homeland may have been located in a more compact area, most likely in eastern Mongolia, that is, close to the ultimate Proto-Mongolic homeland in southern Manchuria and the ultimate Proto-Tungusic homeland in the present-day borderlands of China, Russia, and North Korea. This hypothesis would explain the tight connections of Proto-Turkic with Proto-Mongolic and Proto-Tungusic, regardless of whether one interprets the numerous similarities between the three Altaic families as partly inherited or obtained owing to long-lasting contact. In this regard, early Proto-Turkic is traced back to a region in eastern Mongolia, allowing contact between the languages later known as belonging to the Altaic type typology. Late Proto-Turkic had already spread westwards and was most likely located in northern and western Mongolia, as well as in the Baikal region of southern Siberia. There, the late Proto-Turkic speakers stood in contact with Yeniseian and early Uralic speaking groups, and at later stages with the newly arrived Indo-European, specifically Iranic speakers. The early divergence of Turkic languages started around the time of the Xiongnu period. The Xiongnu were a nomadic confederation of Central Asian nomads, consisting primarily of early Turkic speakers, as well as assimilated Iranic and Yeniseian groups. According to Alexander Savliev and Chungwon Zhang, the predominant part of the Xiongnu population is likely to have spoken Turkic. However, important cultural, technological and political elements may have been transmitted by Eastern Iranian-speaking steppe nomads such as the Saka. Arguably, these Iranian-speaking groups were assimilated over time by the predominant Turkic-speaking part of the Xiongnu population. The Saka themselves contained a significant Paleo-Siberian, specifically Yeniseian cultural and ethnic component, but were primarily speakers of an Iranic language. Genetics. Based on archaeogenetic data, the earliest Turkic-speaking peoples fall into or close to the Northeast Asian gene pool. Genetic data found that almost all modern Turkic peoples retained at least some shared ancestry associated with populations in South Siberia and Mongolia, supporting this region as the inner Asian homeland of the pioneer carriers of Turkic languages, which subsequently expanded into Central Asia. Based on single-path IBD tracks, the common Turkic ancestral population likely stem from a similar source population as modern Mongolic peoples further east. Li and Kwang summarized, an extensive study of the genetic legacy of the Turkic nomads across Eurasia based on autosomal DNA analysis reveals that the source populations for the Turkic nomads who spread Asian genes to non-Turkic peoples were the ancestors of modern-day Tuvinians, Mongols and Buryatis, despite the fact that the latter two are Mongolic-speaking. In sum, one should note that the early Eastern Turkic peoples were in all likelihood genetically closer to their neighboring Mongolic peoples than to various later Turkic peoles of Central and Western Eurasia. Finally, we suggest that the Turkicization of Central and Western Eurasia was the product of multiple processes of language diffusion that involved not only originally Turkic-speaking groups, but also Turkicized, Indo-European, groups. That is, the earliest Turkic groups first Turkicized some non-Turkic groups residing in Western Mongolia and beyond. Then both Turkic and Turkicized groups Turkicized non-Turkic tribes residing in the Kazakh steppes and beyond. Through multiple processes, including the Mongol conquest, the members of the extended Turkic entity spread the Turkic languages across Eurasia. Historical data suggests that the Mongol Empire period acted as secondary force of Turkification, as the Mongol conquest did not involve massive resettlements of Mongols over the conquered territories. Instead, the Mongol war machine was progressively augmented by various Turkic tribes as they expanded, and in this way Turkic peoples reinforced their expansion over the Eurasian steppe and beyond. In sum, the Turkification of Central Asia and parts of Europe was carried out by multiple waves of both early Turkic peoples and Turkified former Indo-European or Yeniseian-speaking groups, who became part of the extended Turkic entity and spread the Turkic languages across Eurasia. The early Eastern Turkic peoples were in all likelihood genetically closer to their neighbouring Mongolic peoples and other ancient Northeast Asians. These historical events transformed the Eurasian steppes from being inhabited by Indo-European speakers of largely West Eurasian ancestry to the mostly Turkic-speaking groups of the present day, who are primarily of East Asian ancestry. All modern Central Asian Turkic populations are a mixture of dominant Siberian Neolithic ancestry and non-negligible Yellow River Basin farmer ancestry, with variable amounts of West Eurasian admixture represented by Yagnobis and Eastern Iranic-speaking groups. This suggests their origins were somewhere in Northeast Asia. The West Eurasian-related ancestry among modern Turkic-speaking peoples is in accordance with the linguistically documented language borrowing in Turkic languages. While modern-day Kazakhs and Kyrgyz retain between 60 to 85%. Northeast Asian ancestry, Karakalpaks, Uzbeks and Uyghurs retain between 40 to 65% Northeast Asian ancestry. Altai Turkic groups, such as Altaians, Tuvans, or Caucasus retain between 75 to 90% Northeast Asian ancestry, and are among the closest groups to the earliest Turkic peoples. Historical Turkic peoples were however not homogeneous. Early medieval Turks displayed a range of genetic heterogeneity, based on the demographic developments on the Eurasian steppes. Early medieval Turks had on average around 62% Northeast Asian ancestry, while later Central Steppe Turks had around 55%. Eastern Turks resembled modern Altai Turks the most, with around 80%. Göktürk remains had approximately 75% Northeast Asian ancestry, with a range from as low as 25% to up to 100% Northeast Asian. A Göktürk elite sample associated with the Ashina tribe displayed 96% Northern East Asian ancestry. The ancient Uyghurs similarly displayed heterogeneity. An Uyghur remain, GD1-3, analyzed in a 2024 study was found to be primarily derived from ancient Northeast Asians, 73 to 83%, with the remainder ancestry being derived from Western steppe herders, 17 to 27%. The archaeogenetic data suggests that the medieval Turkic source population responsible for the Turkification of Central and West Asia, as well as the Volga region, carried around 65% Northeast Asian ancestry, and merged with the respective local groups. Pre-Proto-Turkic roots. It is still unclear which material culture can be associated with Proto-Turkic speakers. The most plausible candidate so far is either the slab grave culture in Mongolia, or a closely related but not identical population. Other options are to associate Proto-Turkic with the Deer Stone Complex and Kovskal Bronze Age cultures, placing them closer to an interaction sphere with Paleo-Siberians. Genetic affinities point to both, a Neolithic human and a Neolithic Amur affiliation, but it is unclear which of the two ancient Northern East Asian sources can be associated with pre-Proto-Turkic. If Turkic shared a genealogical link with Mongolic and Tungusic, an Amur affiliation makes sense. If Turkic does not share a recent genealogical root with Mongolic or Tungusic, a human affiliation is a hot candidate. Finally, the human Neolithic ancestry is closer to the hypothetical pre-Proto-Uralic speakers associated with Neo-Siberian ancestry, which may indicate a relative closer relationship between Turkic and Uralic as well as Yukagir, and possibly also Eskimo-Aleut languages in Northern America. Overall, historical and modern Turkic peoples are characterized by specific Northeast Asian ancestry. Turkic speakers in Western Eurasia are distinct from their neighboring non-Turkic groups by having elevated Northeast Asian ancestry. On an average level, modern Anatolian Turks have around 13% Northeast Asian ancestry or 25% medieval Oghuz ancestry. Turkmens have around 30% Northeast Asian ancestry or 50% medieval Turkic ancestry. Uzbeks and Uyghurs have between 40 to 65% Northeast and East Asian ancestry. Their East Asian-specific components are associated with the Tibetan Empire or Tang Chinese inputs. The Kazakhs and Kyrgyz have between 60 to 85% Northeast Asian ancestry, and are one of the closest groups to early medieval Turks. The Altai Turks top this affinity, and are a good proxy for early medieval Turks and the average Göktürks, deriving between 75 to 90% Northeast Asian ancestry. In comparison, modern Mongolians have between 89 to 95% Northeast Asian ancestry. The gene flow from Western Eurasian sources was preliminarily detected in Mongol population via a tree mix-based phylogenetic tree. The ancestral source was finally identified in QPADM, ranging from 5 to 11% in those Mongolian subgroups. Vice versa, Slavic Russians but also Uralic-speaking Finns derive around 8 to 13% ancestry from an Eastern Asian source, in part associated with the Turco-Mongol expansions. In conclusion, the early Turkic peoples have Northeast Asian roots, and are one of the ancient Northern East Asian ethno-linguistic branches. Their genealogical relationship with Mongolic and Tungusic, or Uralic and other Siberian languages remains controversial. They were one of the most successful nomadic groups, and able to spread their language and culture, as well as Northeast Asian genetic signatures throughout all of Eurasia.